welcome, Casey. Casey was so awesome and let me be on her amazing podcast a few weeks back. And I've told everybody, and I mean this, like I've been on 6 podcasts and they've all been fantastic. But I don't know if it's your 30-year entrepreneur veterancy. Is that a word? Veteran?
It is now.
It is now.
I made it a word. You heard it here first. You just have this really great way of interviewing and cutting out the fluff and getting straight to it. And so I was like, well, of course I got to have you. Who better to teach us about burnout than someone who's been in business for themselves for 30 years? So
awesome.
A quick primer on who you are, Casey.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Molly. And it's nice to meet peeps in your tribe. So that's really fun as well. Like Molly said, I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years, which you can imagine is quite a ride, because I started my first corporation when I was 19 and have had at least 10 different businesses in that span of time. And the first 4 years, when we were really trying to start to find our place, we had done 9 of those businesses in a 4-year period. And my business partner and I, and then the 10th one took off, and that was creating chocolate and doing handmade confections. And we marketed that nationwide. And that was really what I think introduced me to burnout. And that's why I'm so very passionate about this topic in particular, because you would have thought grinding in those first 4 years, creating things from scratch and doing 9 different businesses would have caused burnout. But it was actually the prolonged need to continue to keep reaching higher numbers, because we hit over 7+ figures. And so there was this tremendous amount of pressure in the one that kind of took off that actually dropped those seeds of burnout. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that further on. And we're going to go through 3 ways on how to prevent burnout. So if you're feeling balanced and grounded, awesome. We want to keep you there. And we want to look at some of the signs of burnout and then also go into some preventative measures. If you're already fried, one, you're not alone, especially coming off of 2020 with a lot of changes and changes in the way we do life, changes in the way we do business. And you're already starting to feel some of those downer feelings. We're going to talk about how to approach life and business if you really already feel fried, or you can start to feel like you're just not at your optimal self. And then we're going to kind of wrap it up with how do we maintain a level of alignment? A lot of people talk about, is the work-life balance even a myth? Is it a farce? Like, does it really happen? Do you have to be a unicorn in order to feel that? So I want to give some practical strategies on how to stay in alignment and lead from your heart, and lead in a way that also feels like you can sink into it. Like it's not this hustle and grind. So that's what I want to cover today. But absolutely, if you have any questions, I'm all about having this be interactive. You can either raise your hand on Zoom or unmute yourself or drop a comment in chat. And you don't have to wait until the end. This can literally be a conversation. And I want you to get the most out of our time together. So I'm committed to showing up fully for you. So feel free to make this your space and time.
I should just touch on one thing. Your first business was at 19. What did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started off doing a photographic jewelry company called Montage. So we were out taking these natural pictures of places, nature, different locations around the globe. And then we put them together in like a polycoat basically, and made montages of little teeny artworks for pendants and jewelry. But really that was just one. We went into exterior painting, we did cleaning, we did concessions, like it was all over the board. We were like, we're going to get something and make it work. So we had a lot of perseverance. However, this is another key thing too, like that popcorn brain is not giving it enough time to fructify. Just like being impatient and having this timeline where you think all of your efforts should be coming back to you a lot faster than they are. And so I think that that's another key indicator. Like, I don't know if a lot of your listeners are entrepreneurs, but I feel that burnout affects a wide range of people, right? Like it's non-biased, but where we're seeing it show up more are in the perfectionists. And I think especially with women, we have this tendency to do all the roles, right? We're mother, we're wife, we're leader, we're entrepreneur, like fill in the blank. We have taken on that Post-it note. We've tagged ourselves, we've tagged ourselves in on those roles, and it can be pretty heavy. And I think as today's world is getting faster and different and more demands, and there's so many more inputs and distractions, it can be hard to hold on to sometimes. And we're going to start to feel the effects emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, like it's going to affect us on a holistic level. And so some of the signs of burnout are exhaustion, lifelessness, like inability to cope, hopeless, not really having that passion or drive in your work. And it can show up in maybe getting reoccurring colds, on a physical level. It can show up emotionally where there's some apathy going on, where you're just like, meh, everything is meh, and spiritually, again, it can kind of show up in hopelessness, or maybe even a little bit of a lack of faith that maybe was part of your core, but it just got a little bit shifted and rocky. So those are some of the signs. I also want to make a distinction between general stress and burnout, because general stress, like we're in a human body, we're going to have general stress, like stress is just going to happen. Life happens. This is about like riding the waves. So that's not what I'm talking about. Like that's something that most all of us experience on a daily or weekly basis. But burnout is a prolonged level of stress. It is that stress that has happened for a period of time, sometimes to the point where we're just like, we're used to the hum. Like that's just normal because we have gotten in that hole and we lose sight of the homeostasis. What does it feel like to be grounded? What does it feel like to be in balance, because we have pushed ourselves for a prolonged period of time? And that's what we're going to really be looking at today is burnout, that kind of next level prolonged stress, and a couple things that we can do to prevent that is the very first one, like, because you're here, whether you're here live or listening to the replay, you already have this awareness, you have a curiosity. So that's truly step one, right? So that's a really great thing to have this awareness, whether you want tips, if you're already feeling there, or you're being proactive, like, yeah, I want to make sure that I have a cushion so I can stay in this good, happy place. You have step one, which is awareness. So the very first tip in preventing it then becomes a commitment, because the next step in awareness is really committing to your self-care and really committing to your mental health and your physical well-being. And even if you want to take a pause for a minute and think about the last time you committed to something in your life, and maybe that was your partner, maybe that was, a spiritual path or a dietary choice, like maybe you committed to being vegan or keto, like doesn't matter. Like think about the last time you committed to something and like those qualities that you brought to that choice and commitment, and what was a part or the underlying part of that commitment. Like, what was it for you that you just stake in the ground? I'm making a commitment, not going to turn back. And I want you to think about that and think about those feelings, because there's a huge difference between hoping for something and being super certain about something. And when we stay in the hope space, like, I hope I can lose weight, I hope that I take a walk Monday through Friday. Like there's a very, very different feeling when we're just hoping for something versus like, I commit to walking every day at 4:00. I commit to meditating for 30 minutes, the first thing when I wake up. You can also see there's some specificity when you're certain about something, and hope is very willy-nilly. It's kind of like this cloud, this kind of elusive thing. Like, I hope that this can happen for me. And so one of the big things when we're looking at like protecting our mental well-being and really being aware of our self-care and our physical body is committing that preventing burnout is something that is important to you. And a big part of any kind of commitment is understanding the why underneath it. Why does this even matter to you? Why does this matter to your life? Now, maybe you want to show up as a radiant exemplar for your children. That's a beautiful, deep why. Maybe because you're the sole breadwinner, that you actually are the one that's responsible to bring in income and you're trying to prepare for a retirement plan. Like, whatever that why is, so very important to link it together with that commitment, because when the road gets rocky, and it's not if the road gets rocky, it's truly when, right? Like, we're not kidding ourselves that it's all butterflies and rainbows. And again, it's that just a deeper understanding of when it happens. I have to have a staff, like I have to have like an or this deep core why of like, okay, I'm committing because, and that's going to give us longevity and allow us to reach our goal in a much more sustainable way. Again, a lot of these principles too can apply to other things in your life and business. Like today we're talking about burnout, but this kind of same strategic plan can literally apply to building a business, or going after another kind of goal. So keep that in mind as you're hearing that. So one is truly, yeah, Molly, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So talking about goal setting, it's just, this is like a threefold question. So it sounds like you kind of talk about like SMART goals in a little way, like being specific, but so how do you feel, this was like a curveball. I didn't expect you to talk more about like goals and burnout in tandem. So also, by the way, Dr. Laura is a chiropractor. So like the whole stress and thing, who runs her own practice, I'm sure she has a lot to say on the topic. And Sarah, I'm not sure what if you want to put in the chat, but yeah, just so you kind of know who you're talking to. My audience is a lot of chiropractors who run their own practice.
Awesome.
I've got a lot of health coaches who run their own online business, or, naturopathic doctors, a lot of network marketers, who run their own business. So that's kind of the audience you're speaking to. But yeah, I'm curious. I didn't expect to hear the goal piece go along with burnout. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at this as we want the goal of balance and alignment, right? So with any goal, we have to know where we're going. We have to, again, be connected to that deep why. And the second tip here is the planning. And again, this is something, yes, very specific to SMART goals, where there's something that they're specific, they're measurable, they're actionable, that absolutely comes into play for sure. And this dovetails into tip 2, which is the planning stage. And it's literally like when we're looking at our day, it's first of all, to create a masterpiece day, it starts the night before. And so part of the planning is truly dialing in your PM. And that can look differently for people. And I know, especially because my audience are healers as well, they're in the holistic healing arena. And so this particular piece is kind of linear logical. And I know a lot of healers will gravitate to more of the fluidity and the creativity. And so this piece can also be a game changer, right? When we implement it in a way, one, that feels good to us. 2, we're not talking about like Gestapo spreadsheets here. You have to put like a plan in place that's going to completely work for you, Mm-hmm. So PM night before, what does that look like for you? Maybe it is printing out your Google Cal and just kind of getting an overview of like what's going on for you tomorrow, like what's maybe coming up unusual. Like, are you going to be really packed where you're not going to have time for a relaxing lunch, or, you know what I mean? Like, take a look and have those proactive goggles on, if you will, to set yourself up for success. What are you going to need? Are you going to need to meal prep? Maybe you have to put a pot of chili on like tonight, so tomorrow you're ready, or you're going to put together some chia seed pudding or overnight oats because you've got a meeting and you've got to grab and go. So it's literally like caring for ourselves as much as we're going to care for our patients, and prioritizing ourselves and really being aware of what's going to happen tomorrow. How can I make sure I have sustained energy? And getting into that mindset again. It could be meal prep. It could be reaching out for support. Maybe you need to get a sitter, or maybe you need to make another appointment with your virtual assistant because you know that you're going to need extra, whatever, podcast processing support. So it's kind of just getting your ducks in a row, but it truly starts the night before. So really getting dialed into that PM bookend. and setting yourself up and putting in those little support markers, whether you're supporting yourself or you're asking for help, or maybe you're saying to your hubby, hey, can you come home early because I got an XYZ, like not being afraid to ask for help. I think this is really, really big, especially when we look at the arena of who is being affected by burnout: super women, high achievers, female entrepreneurs, caregivers. We have a tendency to feel that we are superwoman. We can do it all. Like whether that comes from a self-imposed nature or something from society, or it could be that we've even just set ourselves up and everybody around us to have expectations that Molly's going to do it. Dr. Laura's going to do it. Sarah's going to do it. She always does it. She's responsible. She kicks butt with it. And so there's these expectations too that are around us that I think keep us in the groove of doing what we've always done. And I think a big part, again, of that awareness and that commitment is, one, you get to change the rules. One, you get to speak up when it's not working for you any longer. Maybe you could do all the things, but right now you're in a spot that you don't really want to, or you can't. And I think the big thing there is like, it's not about shame and blame. It's literally about leaning in and respecting the morph of change. Right? We're all allowed to change. Our cells are changing on a daily basis. Our organs are being created, right? Often. And so we also get to say, hey, this doesn't work for me anymore. Like I can't be burning the midnight oil, doing 12-hour days, or, volunteering at school and whatever the things are. So we get to create new rules for ourselves when it no longer is serving us, or we start to feel kind of a dip in energy, or we're just not tapped into our most happy selves. Any questions there on the tips before I jump to what to do if you're already fried?
I do have, oh, by the way, Sarah says she's a bookkeeper and a social media manager. So as a fellow social media manager, that's not my main job, but I do still have 11 accounts I run. I can tell you that is the thing that causes the most stress in my business now. So I get you. I feel you, Sarah. And she's also raising special needs kids. So she said burnout is a big topic for her. And she wants to be allowed to come back to building her business with some energy. So, do you follow Rachel Rogers at all?
No, I'm not familiar with her.
She says the first thing you should outsource is your laundry.
Oh, I love it.
That's the truth. But yeah, and then I've also heard it. You talked about not having like this like super strict, schedule, because that in and of itself, when you have I'm not a healer, but I am somebody who likes the fluidity. I hate rigid schedules, give me anxiety. But I heard somebody once refer to it as a menu, like a self-care menu. Like I know you're not necessarily talking about self-care yet, but it's like okay, I don't feel like journaling today, but maybe I'll just like watch a Netflix show, or maybe like whatever it is that makes you kind of. Anyway, I just thought that was a really good way to think about it. But so
absolutely. You have to do what works for you. There's no one way. There's no the way. It's like really getting to know your personality and what works for you, and then repeating what made you feel good and eliminating or deleting what suppressed you or caused any kind of restriction or contraction. And I think that this is a really good point, is being self-aware. Because I think a big part that brings in burnout is constantly looking at the needs of everybody else around you and being disconnected to those embodiment feelings and your own emotions. And so I think a big part of that self-awareness is going to be one of our best things to have faith in, and when it comes to preventing burnout, kind of like getting tapped in. I think the third little tip to committing and then planning, setting yourself up for success, it's truly then taking all the theory, right? Especially because here's the interesting thing. I could be preaching to the choir right now. Many of your people, if they're already in the holistic field and they're into medicine, they could probably be having the cameras turned and be giving this. But the key thing is the action and taking theory and putting it into practice, and then taking that practice and bringing it into self-mastery. That's the exciting part. And that's the part where we can change the story for good. So it's like, okay, how do I take what I already know, what makes perfect sense, and bring it into my action today? And the cool thing is our body is so resilient that it wants to work for us. And so even with a lot of these little tweaks, micro tweaks, it's not shifting our whole life. You're going to start to feel the benefits. And I put a caveat to that because it depends on what stage you are in burnout. And this is why we want to be very proactive before it gets to the point where we've stretched the rubber band so much that there's absolutely no positive resistance left anymore. So we want to prevent getting there because that can take some time. And that's where you're really going to want to reach out for support and see how you can like spackle in the deep groove that's been created over time. But if we're in this state where we're just kind of starting to feel a little lifeless or starting to just notice a change in how we're approaching our work, or it feels like Monday every day, like if we start to feel those things, it's like, how can we put these things into action? So moving into what do you do if you're already fried? What if this sounds great? It's like, that sounds great, Casey, but like, I'm already feeling like a wet washcloth. And believe me, I've had so many times. In fact, I was going to do a slide deck for this. And one of my pictures in there was me fried like years ago. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'll share that, but like we take us with us wherever we go. And so one of the things we can't hide is if we're fried. And here's the interesting thing, especially because your people are in the arena of healing and helping. We have to be radiant exemplars in order to be in alignment with our mission. Because would you go to a healer that had like massive dark circles under their eyes and they looked bloated and lifeless with fried, whatever? Probably not. So it's not a judgment thing, although it sounds a little judgy, but it's truly like begets like. We go towards people's energy. We go towards people's qualities if we desire those qualities. So I think it's even more important, not in a let's add another pressure thing on my to-do list, but in a thing of like, how do I stay in alignment with myself so I can be that radiant exemplar for the people that I'm here to help and serve? So even much more important that we're very aware and tapped in to taking preventative measures for burnout. If you're already feeling fried. So there's a couple things. We want to double down on our fundamentals, which is eating, sleeping, moving. And so we want to really so simple. I know. And this is the thing. This is the part where it's like, yeah, I already know this, but how do I take theory to practice to mastery, right?
How do you not be a cobbler's child?
Absolutely, 100%. And part of that prepping the night before is you can be looking at some of the meal prep, like how do I make it easy for myself to create habits, to grab the healthy things, to have them ready, to not take things that are sucking or pulling me down, like fast carbs, sugar, caffeine. How do I really start to shift my diet from mad and sad, right? Modern American diet and standard American diet, because that's exactly what it's going to do, right? It's exactly what it's doing to us. It's making us mad and it's making us sad. So how do we start eating things that enliven us, that sustain our energy, and that give us grounded tranquility? And so there's tons of information out there on that. We could do a whole nother Zoom on it, but it's doubling down. It's again, harnessing the commitment, doubling down on the fundamentals, looking at food that's going to enliven you, ditch the things that make you crash and burn, right? So that's the food part. The sleep part, so very crucial. How do we amp up that PM bookend now? Because now we're kind of in the danger zone, right? The proactive part is like a nice to have, right? But again, it can be a little bit soft and a little bit kind of like going towards that hope stage. I hope I get to bed by 10. But if we're fried, we actually now have to be much more focused, much more committed to the process, because we really have to change the outcome so we don't continue to go further down. So that optimized PM bookend can now look like, how do I have a digital sunset where I have a complete shutdown? Does that look like, does that look like 5 p.m. where all screens are off, computers off, phones on airplane mode, and you don't watch television? Like, do you need to dial it all the way back where you have a digital sunset? And you can play around with how this feels to you. Like if you express love with your family by tuning into an hour of Netflix a night, like I'm not saying again to get so rigid, but it's truly an opportunity to optimize that PM bookend in a way that's going to serve you more. So when we have that sleep, we're in a much better position to rest, restore, and really clear out a lot of what's happened during the day. And then the movement piece that we can do when we're feeling that, one is having so much self-compassion and grace for yourself, right? And again, maybe you were the person that was all about like P90X and, like cranking out the burpees. Maybe that was you. But when you're in adrenal fatigue, when you're in burnout, we have to like look at our vessel in a much more compassionate way. And what can we do that's really graceful? And again, when you're looking at the thing that you're trying to get the qualities of, again, whether it's a doctor or whether it is a modality, what are the qualities of that modality? So if I'm trying to be grounded, graceful, and in alignment, if I kind of go through my microfiche of like what movement things embody those qualities, yoga is going to come to mind. Qigong is going to come to mind. Gentle stretching with breath work is going to come to mind, because all of those modalities embody grace, alignment, grounded tranquility. So think about those things when you're in that state. And I think one of the, I would say in my experience, especially when, you're so used to being productive, one of the things that I struggled with was trying to not go all in. I remember saying to a coach when she was like, what are the things that you do for yourself? And it was like, I started rattling off like, oh, I wake up and I journal, and then I do gratitude, and then I stretch, and then I do my ringing bowl. And I was like literally going through like my whole, she's like, hold the phone. Like, like, whoa. And so I think we have to be really, really cautious as high achievers to not make our self-care process this tremendous to-do list that we shame ourselves if it's not done or not done right, or we didn't meditate for like 17.5 seconds. Like, we have to just breathe, and we have to give ourselves some compassion and grace. And I think that this can be sometimes the most difficult thing, because you probably know, like when people come to you, like in your arena, like, how do I lose weight? They're just looking for 1, 2, 3. They want the paper handed to them. When it comes to mental and physical self-care, it's truly about surrendering into success. Like, it's surrendering, it's like letting go. And honestly, that can be some of the most difficult learning lessons in the process is embodiment. It's attunement. It's again coming into this third point that I wanted to share with you. How do we lead with ease? And this definitely is going to land in focusing in on 3 of our energy centers, not just the brain, because our brain can keep us running from here and there. It can absolutely be a monkey mind that's very difficult to shut off. So when we're talking about our heart wisdom and leading with ease, we're really looking at integrating our mind space, our heart space, and our belly space, our gut intuition, and our instincts. And when we can be integrated in this way, then we're going to feel more in alignment, feel balanced, absolutely attract our divine right tribe in a much easier and more authentic way. And it's going to help us not only maintain and sustain the balance that we've achieved with some of these tips of preventing burnout, but we're going to have fun doing it, because we're going to be able to craft our life in a way of like, we get to do fill in the blank. Like when we can let go of the got tos and the sense of obligation, this shifts everything. And it also then turns the tables back to that radiant exemplar. How are other people in your life affected by it? Because when mommy's not stressed out and running around in circles, what does that do to the family as a whole unit? When the doctor or the leader is approaching people in a very loving, open, grounded way, what does that do to the practice? So there's a tremendous power in the ripple effect when we can start to integrate those energy centers and lead from the heart. Again, this goes back to the deep why, really leaning into why did I craft this? And being willing, just like if you had an Etch-a-Sketch in your hand, to shake it clear and get a brand new clean slate and recreate something if it's not working for you. So that, I think, is power when we realize that we're the true artist of our life. We literally can craft something from scratch, or maybe we just need to tweak it a little and change the drapes and the shutters, right? Like maybe our foundation is solid, but we just need a few tweaks to add frosting to it so it actually just feels more enlivened. So that's really what I wanted to share. I'm totally open with for questions, and hopefully we're good on time, and I've got a good clock keeper with Molly. Yeah, cool. Awesome.